Hi, I'm Bill McDiarmid. I'm the Dean at the School of Education and the Alumni Distinguished Professor of Education here. My background is that I'm a native North Carolinian, a graduate of Carolina, and have sort of traipsed around the world. Most recently I was at the University of Washington, where I was the Boeing Distinguished Professor of Education, and came back to Carolina in January of this year to assume the deanship. Lately I've been very involved in helping the state develop its Race to the Top proposal. And in conversations with folks from around the state, these conversations have really reinforced my belief that technology really provides us with a vehicle for addressing some of our major challenges, long existing challenges that we've had. And among these, and among the most important, is how best to help educators at different stages in their development develop the skills and knowledge that we know they need to be able to help all children learn. So, of course, Learn-NC has been in the forefront of providing learning opportunities for educators, particularly practicing educators, for a couple of decades. And our hope is to tighten the work that has been going on between the faculty in the School of Education and the very excellent staff at Learn-NC. The School of Education actually represents a wealth of experience and expertise in a whole range of areas, from early childhood to elementary mathematics to literacy across the grades and across the subject matters, to rural education, to adolescent transitions, to counseling, to educational leadership. And increasingly, faculty within the school are interested in how technology can help both them and their students do a better job teaching. Now, I think one of the challenges is how to make the opportunities that Learn-NC provides even more effective and accessible to educators. A key here is getting better measures of the effects that the learning opportunities provided through Learn-NC are having on educators' practice and on student learning. The field, as many of you know, has a very poor record of conducting the kind of rigorous evaluation and research that needs to happen if we're to be able to identify the kinds of learning opportunities that should be supported and we should go forward with. To get the data we need, I think, requires a different and deeper relationship with schools and districts than we've had in the past. We're really dependent on them, as well as on the state, for getting data that would help us better evaluate the products that we're putting out there. Whether, again, it's the work that Learn-NC is doing online or the work the School of Education has been doing online. But at the same time, and this is one of the issues that came up in the teachers' working conditions study, we also need to make these learning opportunities more broadly accessible. One of the things that we learned from the survey is that there's great unevenness across the state in teachers accessing online resources. So I think that's another challenge we have, is how do we reach the educators who we haven't heretofore reached. So we have a situation in the state where you have some educators who have a lot of very rich opportunities to learn, and other educators who have very few. Another challenge occurs at the pre-service and the induction stages of a teacher's development. We know from research, very recent research, particularly the large Pathways study in New York City, that what distinguishes the effectiveness of preparation is not whether a particular route to teaching is traditional or alternative, but the quality of the opportunities that candidates have to try out and refine high leverage practices. So what this suggests for us, and this is where I think we have to be very creative around technology, is that we both need closer supervision of teachers, whether they're pre-service teachers, they're induction teachers, and greater mediation of the kinds of classroom experiences they're having. So that's another thing we're learning from research is, and it goes back to Dewey's point, right, that experience in and of itself can either be a positive educative experience or a negative experience. And what really is important is how that experience is processed. What is it that we come away understanding from the experience? And I think that is at the heart, or it's the foundation for thinking about how do we mediate the experiences teachers at various stages, pre-service, induction, later, are having in their classrooms. One of the things that we've been doing here at the school is actually using webcams and video, and VoiceThread to both observe student teachers and early career educators and to capture classroom clips that then can be later analyzed by a variety of people. So the beauty of a platform like VoiceThread is that you can invite all kinds of folks to come in and take a look at a clip of teaching or a clip of students working together or what have you, and then have an asynchronous conversation about what folks from different points of view, so you may have somebody from arts and science who's a math expert comment on a video clip. You would have the cooperating teacher comment on the video clip. You could have the student teacher, the university supervisor, the methods instructors. So everybody has a common object. And the conversations that come out of that are informed by the expertise and the perspectives of all the different folks who've been part of the experience. So that's the kind of opportunity that the technology presents to us today. Something that, 10 years ago, those of us who in teacher education were longing for and tried in various clumsy ways to rig, whether it was using videotapes or what have you. And by the way, even with that technology, I think John Fredrickson's research and other people's research around teacher video clubs shows the value and the potential effectiveness of having teachers come together and have conversations around common objects. I think another challenge we're facing is how to use Learn-NC to support the types of professional learning communities that seem essential for both teacher retention and increased effectiveness. So one of the challenges we have is not only that beginning teachers tend to leave the classroom at an unacceptably high rate, but it's also the case that students in the classroom who have beginning teachers typically achieve at a lower level than students who have more experienced teachers. So it's both how do we create the kinds of supportive learning communities in the schools that bring in these early career educators, make them part of that community early on, and provide them with the support they need both to feel successful and to be successful. So one of the advantages of technology here is that we can use the technology in a sense to deprivatize practice. And I apologize, but there's a very interesting sports story that I read along these very lines and made me think about this. The St. Louis Cardinals have been very successful over the last decade, and a lot of that is due to their pitching and their pitching coach, a guy by the name of Dave Duncan. And one of the things Duncan instituted was sort of a collaborative approach to pitching, so that when a pitcher is throwing in practice, all the other pitchers come around and watch him pitch. And then what you have is you have a collection of professionals focused on the practice, as it were, of another professional and providing feedback based on their experience and knowledge to that individual. And a good example of how that works is Recently, John Smoltz, who's going to be a Hall of Fame teacher, was released by the Red Sox, picked up by the Cardinals, and in the first session that he had throwing with the other pitchers watching, they immediately picked up that he was tipping his pitches. And he's been phenomenally better than he was with the Red Sox because of that. That's an example of having a professional community that's focused directly in on an individual's practice with the intention of using the collective knowledge in order to improve this individual's practice. And of course, teachers are doing this. It's not as though this isn't happening. I think if you look at the research of Susan Moore Johnson and her students, particularly Susan Cardos, and their research on teachers' professional learning communities, you'll see a similar sort of phenomenon. The other thing that the professional learning communities need is they need information. I mean, it's not as though any given professional community has all of the knowledge that's needed. So what those learning communities need is they need information on effective strategies, new ideas for practice, new ideas about curriculum that are being fed in and sort of chewed over by the group collectively and perhaps tried out, observed, refined, and so forth. So that's another role, I think, that LearnNC plays and can continue to play. And I think some schools, of course, need, and particularly educational leaders in those schools, whether it's teachers or it's principals, also need examples of what professional learning communities look like. How are they created? How do they operate? How are they sustained? And so forth, which is, again, something that LearnNC could do. And then another huge challenge that we face is how we support the continued development of principals. And one of the things, again, that came out of the working conditions study was how little support there is, especially for beginning principals. So in some data that Eric Hirsch was just talking about yesterday, he found that 70% of all new principals have no induction support whatsoever. So this is an enormously demanding and pressure-filled job to step into in many schools. And to do that without support is really shirking our responsibility to try to make people successful. And finally, I think we need to think about, and this is a challenge, differentiating professional learning opportunities. And I mean that in two senses. We need to differentiate by the type of knowledge and skills teachers need, and we need to differentiate by individual teacher need. So when I mean the differentiating by the type of knowledge and skills, I can think of at least three different domains. So one domain is informational, right? And this lends itself very well to, fairly standard online stuff. This is mostly about information about new policies that are being put in place at the state level or the district level, and sort of what are the implications of these policies for schools and for teachers' practice. And an example of that would be the new teacher evaluation process that's going on around the state. So teachers need information about that, and that information needs to be readily and widely accessible. Secondly, teachers also need information about new research-based practices, right? So there's a lot out there that people are saying teachers should do, but there's not a lot out there that people are saying teachers should do that's actually based on good, strong, rigorous, empirical research. But the information on these strategies that do have a good empirical basis need to get out to teachers. So an example might be we've developed here at the school something called a targeted reading intervention that through clinical trials, randomized clinical trials, we've been able to demonstrate makes a very big difference for early readers in the lower elementary grades. And teachers need to have access to the strategies that have been built around this approach. The third is a little more of a challenge, I think, but I think that technology and online resources can also play a role in school-based embedded professional development. So as you know, a lot of professional development occurs when teachers are working on tasks to improve learning within their own school. So it may be curriculum alignment across the grades, or between elementary and middle schools, or between middle schools and high schools. So that kind of alignment work that teachers have been doing. It could be in figuring out what kind of math curriculum is needed, and doing the kind of research that teachers often do, both the research they do and then the sort of informal experimentation they may do with new curricula. So there's a lot of professional development going on there. So I think a challenge for us is, how do we support that kind of embedded professional development that, again, from recent research, we know makes a very big difference both in teacher retention and in student success. So those are just some thoughts I had about where I think the challenges are for the work that we're doing, and the challenges for us as we think about how do we better capitalize on both the evolving technology and the changing student population that we're dealing with. Now the folks who come into our pre-service programs, particularly in our undergraduate program, they're folks that don't know a world without the internet. Whatever you want to call them, digital natives or what have you. That's a great opportunity for us. So learning how to capitalize on that, and that's true in spades as you go pre-college. So how do we take advantage of, whether it's Facebook or it's Twitter, YouTube, whatever, the technologies that we know our students are already using, and that's something that I think where we can really learn from our students if we create the opportunities for them to help us understand how they use these technologies. There's some very good research going on, both here at the School of Ed on this. I think of the work that Janice Anderson and Jeff Green are doing, but around the country as well. So I think that we have an enormous opportunity. I think, as one of my faculty members said recently, our models about teaching and learning are shifting beneath our feet, and that we need to be in much deeper conversation with one another. We need to be in deeper conversation with our students around how to take advantage of that. So I thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you. Again, I apologize for not being there in person, and I wish you all the best in the upcoming events that you have in the conference. Thank you.